Yes, I want to tell you why I'm in love with high-rises, because we simply need them. I think there's no way around high-rises if we want to survive in big cities on our small blue planet. And because we have a rising population and it's expected to exceed like 9 billion people quite in a few decades, we need to think about density and how we can provide cities, how can we do high-rises in a more sophisticated, more elaborated way in an endless city like this 120 million people. How could we ever avoid using the types of high-rises and skyscrapers? So the only chance we have is to elaborate it, to develop it, to invent new types of high-rises, better, more social-orientated, better public places, more integrated types of high-rises, not so autistic high-rises that we had in the 80s and 70s of the last century. And if you look to the economical importance of cities and that they're representing, if you look to the biggest one that they're representing, like 60% of the world income and the economical power, I think it is very impressive on the one hand, and on the other hand, it forces us into invention of new technologies and new kind of architectures as well. There's one thing I would like to show up a little bit more in detail. This is if you compare the density of a city and the use of land and the use of oil or energy, it is a quite drastic relation. Like if you compare London to Houston, Texas, you will see that you have 10 times more square meter you spend per capita, and on the other hand, nearly 10 times more energy you spend. So that shows very, very clearly that the types of American wide sprawl city like Los Angeles, Houston, Texas, and other cities like that is coming to an end. And we have to look for not just the better architecture, better city planning as well. We have to look for a kind of social behavior that makes us able to live in a city which has that kind of density which is needed to survive. We started actually our career with a high-rise. I think the client never knew that that was our first building, happily. And we started it with challenging the types. We tried to establish operable windows. We tried as much as we could to provide a quite natural environment where people can act like at home, open the window, react on the temperature, and just closing the sun shading if they like, and if not, they don't have to do that. So they get a kind of self commitment and as well they feel responsible for their environment much more than if they would be in a closed cavity, in a closed kind of a building where you have blue mirrored glass and all the windows are closed and they have fully air conditioning and you don't have any influence on your climate, and it's just a given issue, and all the kind of sick building syndromes are coming from that kind of feeling exposed to an environment, an indoor environment that you can't influence at all. So we tried to challenge that kind of types several times, like there's a project in Munich where we put circular windows mechanically driven in and out from the facade because Gerald Heinz, who was the client for that building, was not in love with double skin facade, and he wanted to avoid that spend of space, and we said, okay, we can maybe perforate as well a single layer of facade and be successful with that kind of ventilation as well. It does not really work properly. It needs a little time. Okay. And just recently we build that building in Düsseldorf where the double skin is coming to a kind of level where we can clearly address all these issues like solar shading, like noise protection, like operable windows with high wind speed, pressure on the facade, things like that, in a very good and very efficient way. And then it turned into not just single high-rises somewhere in a business park, but we turned into cities like Hamburg, where we did this small residential high-rise under conditions that are quite diverse, because one hand is the old harbor storage building architecture. On the other hand, there is a new city that is developed the last 10 years and will be developed in the next 10 years. And then we got a commission in Osaka where the task was, the challenge was to build in a very, very dense situation to integrate 7th story of retail and shopping and restaurants and everything in that podium, and on top, if you like, the typical Japanese office tower, which we try to break by doing operable windows in it and to have a double skin around and ventilate the place 50% of the year. Also, it's a quite humid place and quite hot place in summer, ventilated 50% of the year by natural ventilation. And the one thing that we did here, especially, that is we integrated an opera house on the 7th floor, which was a special challenge because we had to bring all the people upstairs and into that kind of facility. And I think that shows to an extreme that it is possible to civilize a high-rise, a skyscraper building to a certain extent, and that we can integrate even unexpected things into it. An example where I would like to spend some more minutes with is Singapore, because our project in Singapore, which is more than 400,000 square meters above ground, is an example for building in mega cities. And if you build in an environment like Singapore, very humid, very hot, not the most comfortable place in the world, you have to think about how the people can live a comfortable life there. What we have here is the idea of an oasis in the middle of that 4 skyscrapers. We cut out that hole, we put an oasis-like garden into it, and we made sure that the whole precinct, the whole building is orientated towards that kind of garden. And then we tried to measure the amount of biomass or plant mass that would have been on that site if it is a jungle, because the natural environment in Singapore would be a jungle. And we tried to cover that, give that back to the people by putting gardens on every level of the building, ground floor, even basement, then every level of the podium, then another level of the transfer floors, and then on top of the building in the, on the roof garden. And as well, we let the plant climb on the facade and on that louvers to make sure that the microclimatical balance is better, to make sure that the rainwater is kept back better than it would be without the plants, that we're producing more oxygen like it would be normally the case. And many, many other issues like social issues, because people like that kind of plant. There are many other issues we could raise, because it's a LEED platinum rated building. It's a platinum green mark, Singapore green mark rated building. It has many, many other aspects that should be in the focus of every project in megacities, because it's a vitally mixed building with a high density. It is super green. It has more than 1,000 residential units, so roughly 2, 3, maybe 4,000 people will live there. There will be 20, 30, even maybe more people working there. They have everything they need for life around them, In a climate like Singapore, that might be a good idea. In a climate like London, you could just walk the other side of the street and have no problem. There it can be heavy rain, the monsoon, there could be a temperature which is not really comfortable, so we try to keep the people inside the building or inside the district and then connect them with subterranean subway or pedestrian walkways, covered walkways, underground walkways with the other buildings around and with the other parts of the city around. I won't get too much into detail because the time is running, but one thing we try to invent here is to show the client, is there a way to zero energy in a building like that? And what do you have to do to get there? And if you look carefully to the very end, there's a rest of percentage that you have to cover with green electricity that you can't produce on site, but that percentage is quite low. So you can get down with your energy consumption significantly and with your whole rating in the green rating system quite high by doing all these good things: compact building, tight facade, a kind of very advanced energy production, wind turbines, many things. You have to do that all to get there. But one thing which is especially interesting, I think, is because Singapore is so humid, you're looking always for a breeze, and what we did is we designed the building in the wind tunnel to make sure that you get that kind of breeze, that you get at least a nighttime purge, that you are having some wind turbulences that you provoke by the design of the building, by openings to the outside, by even openings in the building itself to make sure that the residential units have access to quite fresh air all around. And that is how it will look like in 2016. We have just begun this work on site. A building I would like to show you a little bit into detail is Bligh Street, and the reason why I do that is I think if you look to London and the heritage aspects, Height and Heritage is the title of the conference, I have to say, if not here in London or mid-Europe, where else should we develop the most advanced, sophisticated, more civilized kind of skyscrapers, where the value of the land is such high, where the social ability and the economical ability is so evolved. And we did a building in Bligh, this is a street in Sydney, which is representing maybe our idea about a civilized kind of high-rise types. First of all, it is in the middle of the business district. It is in the middle of one of the most dense places in the world. Sydney overall is not a very dense place, but the East Sydney, the business district, is extremely dense. And although it has a very privileged situation because it's all orientated towards the harbor, we had to be very careful to provide really the right views, the right orientation, sun orientation, and so on. And that's a story I would like to tell you. First of all, it is not the tallest building. It is a kind of small brother between all these big buildings. We could have built a building which is much taller, 250, 245 meters. We didn't do that. We said, okay, it's better to have a bigger floor plate, a more rational building on one hand, but then we spent the money, we spent the effort, we spent the attention more on the social and the spatial aspects of the building. We'll see that in a minute. Sydney itself has a rectangular grid, and for some reason, for some decades in the last century, the beginning of the last century, they decided to have a small quarter of the city with streets orientated to the governor's house diagonally, and then they get back to the rectangular scheme. And that left Farah Place, a place where we built a building on, with in between all these grids. A very tricky place, but it's a very beautiful view because heritage buildings in front of the building and some smaller buildings that are in the perimeter zone of bigger ones make sure that forever that view will be kept free. And the cylindrical, that elliptical form was chosen because it fits into both kinds of grids. make sure, on the other hand, that by a turn of the elliptical thing, we make use of the biggest distance on the side, and at the same time we orientate ourselves towards the harbor with the front of the building, not with the shoulder of the building. There are quite tall buildings all around, as you have seen before, so we had to make sure that the views are kept free. And if you look from the harbor to the building, you see it's a free view to the building as well from the building to the harbor. And then there are other views towards the city and towards Bondi Beach and Potts Point, and to make sure that you have that views between the taller buildings, made it needed that we orientate the building and we position the course very, very carefully. That are the views back to the city, O'Donnell Street, and then to the heritage buildings, and then the position of the core, like the cores block out the view to the nearest neighbors, but they are leaving the better views free for access. And then we tried hard to find the right facade and the right orientation for the building to make sure that most of the people have that view. What we did is a double skin facade all around, and what we did is we paid attention to the fact that the fireplace was a triangular place overshadowed nearly whole year by the bigger buildings around. And by turning the elliptical building to that kind of position, we made sure that fireplace was extended to nearly double the size. And then we raised the building by 20 meters. You will see that in a minute. Make sure that it is an ongoing public ground floor all the way up to Bligh Street. Then plantings and some public use in the ground floor made sure that this is an attractive point. If you look carefully to that, I don't have a pointer, I think, but you will see that is on the left side you can see the triangular originally shape of fireplace, and you see that we step back with the building to make sure that it is bigger, and then we have that stair in front of the building, make it even more public and more open. And if you look to that, there's a view back to the heritage building the other side of the street, and this is the section how it could have been, and that would be then the view. And we raised the building by 20 meters. More people enjoy the view, and at the same time we have an completely open public ground floor. To make sure that that is properly addressed, the people in the building is a very prestigious lawyers' company. Then the Prime Minister of Australia has his official offices here, and Bloomberg is in the building. So the level of security they are looking for might be exactly the same that you're looking for in the City of London, but the accessibility of the building is a completely different one. It's not that highly secured, artistic kind of skyscraper, where the people have to stay outside the building, but they are invited to enter the building and use it as a public space. And first step into it is that stair in front of the building, where people enjoy sitting there, enjoying themselves, having a good time. And the trick is, it's not just open, it is the same time it is providing in summer some shading on the stairs where you like that because it's quite hot in Sydney. And then in the winter, the flatter sun is coming into the building and warm up the place, so it's a very comfortable place as well in an Australian winter day. So the people like that pretty much, and they use it. And as you know, you can't force people to use a place like that. It has to be successful. And I think it's one of the biggest compliments that you can get as an architect if people accept your building being part of their daily life. And then there is a restaurant and a cafeteria. You can open the building completely all around. The facade is like a garage door openable, 50 meters of operable windows in the ground floor. We have a childcare, a public one. Even the car entrance is part of the front and not the back of the building. We have a kind of shortcut around the building with that green wall, and on the other side we have that cafe point, sadly closed on that photograph, but normally open for the public. And the building got a green star rating, 6 stars in Australia, the highest points ever awarded in Australia so far. It has a double skin facade on the regular floors. The double skin works with closed cavity, with sun shading in between these two layers, with used air outlet and inlets. It makes sure that the sun shading is extremely efficient because it is in place, in work, with any wind condition, with any weather condition, and we have a certain kind of facilities like tri-generation with a very high efficiency. We have double skin facade, as I mentioned. We're producing electricity with that tri-generation plant, which is run by 100% biofuel. We could reduce the CO2 emission measured with or compared with a normal building by more than 40%. We save 100,000 liters of water every day by a quite curious trick. We get water back from the Bondi main sewer. We call that sewer mining. We clean it and we put it into the building for recooling and for toilet flush. So we are producing more fresh water than we get out from the public net. We are providing 4% of the building's GFA as natural ventilated by that atrium. And because it's natural ventilated, it was an addition to the allowed GFA. So it was not counted against the allowance of GFA. We have that big atrium in the middle of the building, 145 meters, which is a resource of fresh air as well as night purge. And we use it as well for all the vertical elements like elevators and stairs and things. And what is interesting about that is not just a communication hub and the main entrance of the building, reception and restaurants are there. At the same time, it's a matter of community because a normal office high-rise is quite communication, how would you call that? I mean, it doesn't encourage you to communicate. You meet the people in the elevator by accident or maybe in the lobby, but here you can see the people by moving through the building. You look from the back into every tenant's environment, and you know each other by just looking at your environment, and that is possible even with people like the Prime Minister of Australia, so it should be possible wherever in the world. There should be a movie which is not there. The way or the view back to the building. On top we have a roof terrace, which is a quite nice place to do a reception or other things, not public, but it is accessible for the users, the tenants of the building itself. There's one thing which I can encourage the city government to do. The city government of Sydney does not just force you to do an international competition. The second thing they give you is, they give you for design excellency 10% extra GFA, which is a significant contribution to the economical success of a developer's building like that was. And then, well, a lot of awards. And I have to say that was a very fresh experience in a quite far away country. A very, very good kind of collaboration with the local architects, with the local government, with the client to make that possible. The decision to do that building, which is the building with the highest rent in Australia, was done 2 weeks after the bankruptcy of Lehman. So there were quite tough decision makers there. They were very, very sure about what they tried to do, and they made sure that everybody else followed their idea. So thank you very much for your attention.